Hello, in this video and the subsequent videos I'm going to be showing you how to make these reversible scrub caps, 100% cotton or lined if you prefer. You could even do one with satin lining. I've made some of those. So we will get started. First thing is to print out the pattern. The instructions are there. You should have received those. You should have been able to print these out on your printer. Make sure you choose actual size in the dialog box, and when you put them together, butt the edges together, don't overlap, don't cut anything off. That is how it will end up being exactly the right size. You know, printers don't print right out to the edge, but the image technically does go to the edge of the paper. So you can see how it comes together, especially you can tell in that angled part. So that one's taped, ready to cut out. And here's piece B, same thing, butt them together. And double check the lengths on these. The other one was 17 3/8, this one's 22 1/2. If they're not right, you want to go back and check your printer settings and make sure you've got that on actual size, printing out that PDF. All right, so cutting them all out. And they're ready. You're ready to cut your fabric. Here's the length again, 17 3/8, I believe, by 22 and something. It's on there. And now you double check those lengths. So these are ready to be cut out. So here's your fabric, 44 to 45 inches wide by about 14 to 15 inches cut length. And in order to make the best use of the fabric, I will take and refold it and lay that first piece down, piece A down. It's not quite wide enough. Scoot it over a little bit until it's the right width, and that's about right. So I'm going to run it, but bump it up against that top edge. If your top edge is perfectly straight, you could just push it right up against that and use that as your edge. I could pin it on here, but I prefer putting weights on it. So I grabbed these Allen wrenches sets out of our garage using a Sharpie fine point. You could use a wider point as long as it's on the outside of the cut. You don't want a lot of that in your seam allowance. But I just make some dashed lines along the edge. Don't drag it. If you drag it, it tends to drag the fabric with it. So the little dashed line seems to work. You can also hold it down like that and do a straight edge. But see, it did not show up, so I had to come back and trace over it anyway. So just do what works. Do what works with your fabric and with the tools that you have. Here you can use a rotary cutter with a mat to cut it out, or scissors, as I'm showing here. I'm assuming a lot of people watching this won't have a rotary cutter, so showing it with scissors. Now I'm snipping these two marks at the bottom and two little snip marks here to show the center of that front piece A. Now laying it back out again. See, this will fit right in there. And weigh it down, trace around it. Here again, I'm trying the straight edge again, and this time it does work. So, like I said, do what works. And it's not fine tailoring. I mean, if it's a little bit off, it's going to look fine. So there is piece B, and we're going to go ahead and using that pattern piece to mark this snip, 1/8 inch snip mark there at the top to mark the center top. All right, so that piece B, piece A, they're ready to go, and I have already cut out the other shell or other color. So one is the one half, one is the other half. We'll call them shells, and we'll stitch each one together separately and then stitch them together. So here are the notions that you'll need. This is from papermart.com. It's not been easy to find Grossgrain. I think it's a little easier now, but at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, you couldn't find it. Cutting these at 18 inches. Papermart.com. This 50-yard spool was about, I think it was less than $5. So if you've shopped for ribbon, you know that's a deal. I bought quite a few different colors. So now I'm using the lighter to just lightly melt the edge. You don't want this to fray when you're washing it or when you're wearing it. So you just barely drag it along the edge. And you should be able to feel it. It melts it just a tiny bit. You can feel it beating up on the edge. See there, it's not beaded up enough. So I'm going to just hit it again, just gently, and kind of tap it almost. See, I'm tapping that edge. And now that feels right. So the ribbon is ready. Next thing, here's the a way to do it if you're going to make a lot of them. This is 18 inches around, so every time you go around once, it's 18. Then you can cut it. You just run your scissors through that groove. Now we're going to cut our elastic. I'd say cut it off at about 5 inches if you're going to use a pin, a safety pin on the end to guide it through the casing. You won't use all 5 inches, but it's a good length to work with. It's been difficult finding elastic in the fabric stores during the COVID pandemic, so I have provided here another option, and that's using a hair tie. You can cut it right where it's joined there, that little mark where it's joined, and you tie knots at both ends. Here's a thicker one. You can find the thicker ones as well. Sometimes the thick ones are hard to get the safety pin through, so what I'd recommend is tying a piece of string or some heavy thread on it, and then knotting it around a safety pin and pulling it through that way. There's another option. This is what I do. I put a long piece on a yarn needle because I do a number of these, so I just keep that next to my sewing machine. So there's your 3 pieces of elastic, and if you want to put face mask buttons on the inside and outside of your cap to save your ears, these are a great option. I found 20 millimeter clear plastic 2-hole buttons on Amazon, and I will include the link in the description.